when I set out for a day of cycling on a bikepacking trip. Much of the day centers around finding that incredible camp spot at the end of the day. No matter what hardships you'll have to endure during the day, rain, cold or headwinds. Once you've set up your tent at that stunning campsite at the end of the day, all of your struggles that have led up to that point suddenly seem to have had a purpose, and you feel a sense of accomplishment of all the tribulations you've gone through during the day. Sometimes a single day on a bikepacking trip can feel like you get to experience a whole week in just 24 hours. This specific day on my bikepacking trip was gonna be one of those days. In the past 3 days of my trip toward the North Cape, I had experienced everything from 30-degree heat and pristine sandy white beaches to having my tent almost blowing away in the freezing wind during the night. What I'm trying to say here is that the weather up here in Arctic Norway can change from one extreme to the other in just a matter of minutes. And this day wasn't gonna be any different. I started the day making my way over the bridge to the northernmost island of the Vesterålen Islands, Andøya. The slogan for Andøya is "Where the ocean comes ashore." Nowhere in Europe the distance from land to the edge of the deep sea trench is shorter than here. In fact, only 17 kilometers off the coast of Andøya there are depths of about 3,000 meters. This makes for a huge playground for whales who come here to reproduce and hunt squid, which are in abundance in the deep waters just outside of Andøya. Right after you come over the bridge, you'll get to decide if you want to follow the more scenic route along the west coast or the more direct eastern coast road. For us cyclists, it isn't really a difficult choice at all, since there are a lot fewer cars taking the western route. The road along the west coast follows a broad shelf of cultivated land where the few people that call this their home live between the jagged peaks and the wide open ocean. Some of Norway's most beautiful beaches line the road, and if you stop for a while and admire the view over the ocean, you might be able to spot whales, seals or eagles. However, the weather wasn't on my side this specific day. I had to battle nasty headwinds for most of the day and even some rain as well. So for me it was more of a keep your head down and dig deep kind of a day, rather than stopping at beautiful beaches kind of a day. So we're off to a pretty cold and gloomy day today, the second day of my tour here in the Vesterålen Islands. And the goal of today is to make it to the ferry that goes to Senja. And I have about 4 hours left until the ferry leaves, and I still have around 40 kilometers to go there. That should be doable, but I've got a headwind today instead of the nice tailwind I had yesterday, so I'm going to have to push on to be able to get there in time. And the reason why I want to catch this specific ferry is that it only goes 3 times a day, and this one in the evening is the last one for today. If I miss it, I have to stay on this island for 1 day more, so got a lot riding on making this ferry. In Norway there are 18 panoramic roads that have been carefully selected as Norway's scenic routes. These are roads that take you along the most beautiful scenery that Norway has to offer. And since we're talking Norway here, these are pretty spectacular to say the least. During my trip to the North Cape, I would be able to enjoy cycling on 3 of these roads. The one that I was on right now in Andøya, the one back in Lofoten, and the one coming up in Senja. Each of these 18 routes takes you along either spectacular fjords, mountains, waterfalls, or glaciers. And all of them include impressive rest stops with viewpoints, art installations, and some of the most spectacular roadside bathrooms you've ever seen. And one of those was coming up on the Andøya scenic route, the Bukkekirka rest stop. So they have these toilets along the scenic roads in Norway called the Million Kroner toilets. And they definitely make up for their name. Just look at the view behind me here. And this isn't your ordinary roadside toilet either. This is more like a 5-star hotel bathroom. And they're also heated, so it's kind of nice to just come in here for a couple of minutes when it's a cold day like it is outside today. And when I was inside, I was kind of wondering about the privacy issue with people just staring into the toilets. But when I get outside now, I realize that it's some sort of reflective glass, so you can't see in, you can only see out from the toilets. The landscape of Andøya is characterized by bog areas and marshland, but also has steep mountain ranges with mountains reaching up to 700 meters high. The flat and continuous bog areas makes for perfect conditions for peat and cloudberries, what we up here in the north call the gold of the Arctic. If you haven't already tried this delicious berry, make sure to do so when you're visiting these parts of the world. Perhaps best enjoyed together with some whipped cream on top of a waffle. This area is also well known for its rich nature and wildlife. Quite a wind here. The weather was actually quite nice during the middle of the day, but in the afternoon I started a climb over a pass and found myself going through the low-lying clouds. And I sure felt the temperature change going over it. This island never ceased to surprise me. If it wasn't one of the northernmost golf courses in the world, then just around the next corner I ran into the Norwegian Space Center, where you can learn more about outer space and the northern lights. And it's no wonder why they decided to put the Space Center out here far out into the ocean. There are hardly any houses around here, so I'm assuming the light pollution is at a minimum. I'm also thinking that this would be an ideal place to watch the Aurora Borealis when the night starts getting longer in the fall. I made my approach to Andøya, quickly rode through town and made it in time to catch the last ferry of the day over to Senja. In Andøya there are several companies specializing in whale watching safaris. So we just reached the ferry terminal here in Andøya with about a half hour to spare. But you don't need to get here early since there's obviously not a waiting room here, so this is the only place where you can get some warmth. It's really cold outside, it has to be around 10 degrees or so. And while we're on the subject of toilets, this is not as fancy as the million-kroner toilet that I went by earlier today. This is more your low-budget version of a toilet, but it's still warm in here. I boarded the ferry a couple of minutes later and had a pleasant 2-hour ferry ride ahead of me. I was able to sit down and relax for a while and talk to some of the other cyclists that I met at the campground the previous night. So I'm just off the ferry now, and what a difference a ferry ride can make. Going from Andøya, where it was around 10 degrees and totally cloudy, to here in Senja, where the sun is shining, we have blue clouds and it's not that warm, it's around 17 or 18 degrees or something. I plan to cycle on for another 30 kilometers or so. I've made about 75 so far this day. The plan is to cycle on for maybe 2 more hours and then find a great wild camping spot. In Senja they have a smart system when it comes to cycling through tunnels. As you enter the tunnel, there's a big red button that you can push to alert drivers that there's one or more cyclists inside of the tunnel at the moment. As an extra precaution, it's also recommended to turn on your bike lights to be visible in the tunnel. Whew. In the evening I found a great little roadside stop and decided to make a short stop to refuel to be able to make it the last couple of kilometers to the camp spot of the day. I find riding late in the evening to be my favorite time of day. Usually the wind has died down by then and the temperature is just right. And not to mention the evening light. Since the sun never really sets up here in the Arctic, it kind of feels like you're experiencing golden hour all throughout the evening. Just before I was to turn off toward the camp spot, I found another great roadside bathroom, which I just had to try. So I'm continuing on the toilet theme today, and this time I really need to go. And you can really feel that this has been built recently because you can smell the pine wood here. I took off the main road just after the bathroom visit and headed for what seemed like an ideal camp spot for the night. And boy, did the camp spot deliver. I think I might have been even luckier this time around than I was with the camp spot for the first night. A green field just slightly sloping toward the stunning fjord below. Life could be a lot worse. So just tell me one thing, am I or am I not the master of finding great wild camping spots? So join me next time when I take you on a tour of my favorite island here in Norway, Senja. It's like Lofoten, but without all the tourists. If you haven't watched my previous videos from Senja that I did a couple of years ago, you can do so by clicking the link up in the corner here. Otherwise, I'll see you next time, and until then, have a good one.